Marvel's Phoenix Man, The Ultimate Power Rises. Please like, share, and subscribe. Episode 116. Another split is moving? Leon asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes, Master, another split is moving, very fast. It is a space-jumping movement, and it is now in the Pacific Ocean. The way of killing. He seems to be sensing our recovery, no longer that muddy state, so he should have moved this time to find us. Corruption Road. That is to say, you can still detect each other's state by feeling each other? Leon asked. The killer nodded. Indeed, although this feeling is very vague, with our ability, we can clearly perceive each other's state. He did not pause, and then added, just like before, in the state of chaos, this kind of perception is simply impossible to achieve, because at that time we did not have any knowledge and cognition, and the reaction to external objects was very random, so this ability was basically useless. And now that we have personality and self-knowledge, we have strengthened this perception, and we can easily analyze each other's state from induction. Leon nodded, and then asked, what is the state of that sub-embodiment? Very normal. Corruption Road. Normal? Leon was slightly puzzled. Corruption said, we can sense his state, it is indeed very normal. This normality means that he has a normal personality and self-knowledge, and even these two are clearer than us. In fact, he is the entity. Leon was slightly stunned and then reflected. He had seen the split scene from the memory pictures of the three people. That split was indeed the most normal of the four splits. From the beginning of the performance was very calm, and from the way he broke the ceiling to escape, he seemed to be subconsciously escaping something. Or in the original subconscious, he did not want to do more killing, so when the other three split slaughtered the experimenters, he chose to escape. Well, from this point of view, it seems that he ran to Huaxia in that split. It is very likely that he acted autonomously, and before this, he should not have much reason, but also relied on instinct to act. Instinctively let him feel that he could get help in Huaxia, so he went directly there. So it seems that his sanity should be restored in the process of going to China, or after going to Huaxia. Then he sensed your presence, but you were always in a state of chaos and disorder, and he did not show his face, but chose to continue to escape. But now when he found that you had regained your sanity, he quickly came to you. The three of them were silent, and after a moment they said, he may be trying to devour us. Devour? Leon heard a new word, which surprised him. What it meant he couldn't be clearer. In fact, without three people to explain, he could analyze a rough idea. The subject chose to escape, and it is very promising that after his sanity has been restored, he understands what the three branches are doing, or it is difficult to resist the three divisions at all, so he chooses to leave. And all four of them originated from one person, is the captain of the United States, Steve, so in fact, the experiment is not a failure, but the experimental goal is from 1 point to 4, as long as each other has sanity, restored personality, and self-awareness, and then fused with each other, then it can be restored to the real Captain Steve. It seems that the subject wants to communicate with the three people who have regained their senses in order to make them agree to the fusion of each other. Leon brainstormed and got a rough idea of the cause of the matter, and he couldn't help but feel a little funny. These three branches really seemed extremely powerful, and if they were really counted, if they were able to exert their abilities to the fullest, although they could not hurt him, they might all bring a lot of trouble to the Qin. You must know that Qin's current ability is extremely strong, and it can be called the most powerful mutant on the earth under him, and the existence that can bring him a lot of trouble is really good. Thinking of this, he suddenly laughed, and then said, let's go, find a place to wait for him. Yes, Master. The three spoke in unison. Leon opened a space-time passage directly next to him, and then stepped into it first, and the three people followed closely behind. The space-time passage disappeared, and the figures of the four people also disappeared. At this time, in the sky above Washington, a time and space rift appeared, and Leon walked out of it with the three of them, looking at the still bustling city below, with an inexplicable smile on his face. The prosperity below seemed to him to be a little too false, the result of America's strong control, although the whole society had produced a lot of turmoil, but under the suppression of a strong conquest and an army, all the rebellion had been suppressed for the time being, and because of his threat, people had to put away their grievances and unite, which made the current social order look a little strange. The people's hearts floated, fear, panic, uneasiness, and then stability and unity, self-improvement, self-courage, thus reaching a strange balance, and under this balance, the social order also tended to be stable. Leon looked at everything below, not at this moment to destroy this false prosperity, but waiting for an opportunity, waiting for a chance to give the world a fatal blow. The three stood behind him, and the wind in the air blew on the three people, but even the hair of the three people could not be lifted. Master, the main body has entered North America, landed from the west coast, and is now coming to this side. The way of killing. Leon nodded. Washington was on the east coast, coming from the west coast, and Steve's main body was obviously going to cross the whole of America, but the speed of reaching North America so quickly was really amazing. At least the ability to move freely around the world was still worth affirming. This wait was more than 10 minutes, the process was very short. Liang at a certain moment, suddenly turned his head to look in a direction, that is, the west. From there, he felt a powerful force flying rapidly. It is not so much a powerful force as a powerful person appearing, and the visitor is naturally the body of Steve's four splits, and when he appears in front of Leon's eyes, he smiles. The person who came with Steve's appearance and stature, no different from the original Steve, and even if he didn't know that they were one, Leon would think that the person in front of him was Captain Me himself. Episode 117. What appeared in front of Liang was a person who had the same appearance as Captain Migua, with short golden hair and very capable Li Sua, wearing a power suit. That power suit Liang was also very familiar. This was clearly the clothing of the Eastern martial artist. Thinking that he had gone to China for a trip, Liang was not surprised by his dress. And because of this power suit, it makes Leon and a new association. In the Marvel Universe world, what is the most famous force in the East? That is, the Divine Spear Bureau. That's right, the Sharp Spear Bureau, which is on a par with S.H.I.E.L.D. in the United States. This name Liang didn't bother to evaluate, and could only say that the Marvel editorial board was really too convenient, and he didn't even have the effort to rename it. And the other big force is Kunlun Mountain, where there are successive iron fists, all of whom are strong, and there are cultivation methods that warriors dream of, as well as the powerful energy of Qi. As for where the main body of the Captain of the United States has been in China, it is already obvious to see this power suit, and it must be Kunlun who has not run. Leon looked at each other, curiously, and Steve suddenly changed his face after seeing Leon, becoming very serious, and then said, "Leon, how did you end up here? You know me?" Leon asked curiously. The expression on Steve's serious face remained unchanged, and he said in a deep voice, "Of course I know you." Leon then asked, "Do you know who you are?" "I'm Captain Rice, Steve Rogers. Why do you ask?" Steve said. Leon only slightly bowed his head when he heard this, and then said, "Because I want to confirm that after experiencing that experiment, you are still not you." "How? What do you want to say about that experiment?" "As far as I know, it seems that the experiment did not come according to your wishes, and it can be said that it was forced to start without your consent." He smiled and said, "How does it feel to be betrayed? Do you still want to continue to guard this country?" Steve was silent, perhaps because Leon said something about a pain in his heart, making his originally serious face become a little relaxed, and after half a moment of silence, he said, "Although that experiment is not my last wish, but for the sake of this country, I am willing to give everything I have." "Well, when did you learn to fool yourself?" Leon asked with a smile. Steve did not answer him head-on, saying directly, "What else do you know?" Leon shrugged and took a step to the side, letting the three people behind him appear in front of him, and said to Steve, "I know everything about you, from the fact that you were fished up and sent to the laboratory, to the experiment that went wrong, and the three splits that ran out to make trouble. I know all this." Steve's eyes suddenly shrank when he looked at his three splits, and his face became more and more solemn. He was now the product of a split after the experiment, although he was the most complete captain of the United States. But he was the one who inherited the personality of the United States Captain Steve and reason and self-knowledge. Therefore, his ability may not be the most among the four branches, but it is definitely the most human-like one. And because of the full heart of the original Captain of the United States, he was also full of complex senses for this experiment. On the one hand, he was extremely resistant, especially after learning what the three splits had done. He imposed this evil on himself. The other is the guilt caused by what he did that made him not want to face the country, so he chose to run to the east to seek spiritual comfort. "How could they be with you?" he asked, the key to the problem. Liang smiled, and then his smile faded, but he said very calmly, "As you can see, they are now my people." "You?" Steve had a visibly angry look on his face, but he was forced down by his self-sufficiency, took a deep breath, and said, "So, they have regained their senses, all because of you?" Leon shrugged. "Indeed, correctly, I have shaped their personality and self-perception, and I have instilled in them the command not to betray me, and now they are all my people, the sharp knives in my hands. What do you want to say?" Steve closed his eyes and clenched his fists. He was extremely angry inside, because he knew that his vision of merging with the three splits had failed, and having three splits to help Leon would bring more terrible disasters to the whole world in the future. This makes Steve, who has always claimed to be the guardian, extremely uneasy in his heart, but because of that sense of mission, he has to face Leon. So the first thing he said when he opened his eyes was, "So it seems that I can only give everything I have to stop you." Liang raised an eyebrow, and did not show how surprised he was, but laughed. "How you want to do it, in my opinion, it does not matter at all, because I am an enemy of the whole world. There are not many enemies for you, less than one enemy for you, and if you want to stop me, it is not enough to rely on your strength alone. Teach you a skill, to unite all the forces you can unite, and then appear in front of me. Now you." Still not working. Leon's words are very blunt, even almost ironic, but it is this attitude that makes Steve feel powerless. He knows that he is now strong, and to put it bluntly, he is not afraid of anyone in this world except Leon and Sheen. But the most uncomfortable thing for him was that the two people were in the same group, and now even his three splits had become Liang's accomplices, making it more difficult for him to accept. It's useless to talk more. As soon as Steve opened his mouth, he said in Chinese, I learned about a culture from the ancient East, and this culture is called chivalry. In addition, I also understand a sentence, the great hero, for the country and the people. Liang heard the corners of his mouth twitch slightly, and this kind of middle two line came out of Steve's mouth, and the contrast was really unacceptable. Oh, if you want to fight, I won't shoot, let your brothers play with you. As Leon spoke, he stepped back, ceding the battlefield to Steve in killing, corruption, and distortion, and the atmosphere in the field suddenly changed and became solemn. Steve was fully engrossed, and a momentum rose up from his body, a kind of pressure-like substance, which made Leon look slightly sideways. Episode 118, it seems that this guy has learned a lot of skills in China. Liang sighed slightly. He could feel the fortitude in Steve's eyes, and that kind of substance-like pressure was also triggered by an alien energy, and this energy, if not accidentally, was qi. Liang raised an eyebrow, and a flash appeared more than 10 meters away. At the same time, the three splits scattered forward, encircling Steve in the middle, showing a combined attack. The killing eyes suddenly became scarlet, the killing intent emerged, and the temperature around his body instantly dropped by more than 10 degrees, which was already affecting reality by virtue of the spiritual level, unlike Liang's ability to control the mind, which was caused by pure spiritual strength. A layer of mist appeared around the decay, and this layer of fog surrounded it like a layer of water vapor, but as soon as it appeared, it made the air ripple in waves, and that strong corrosive force was weakly destroying the structure of space. As for the distortion, at this time, the body opened his hands, and the fingernails turned into animal-like claws, which flashed with cold light, and it seemed that the change was the smallest, but Liang knew that the strength of the distortion body had changed in this instant. Leon stood not far away, watching the four of them face each other for a long time, and Steve faced his three splits alone, with a serious expression and a very dignified expression, and the momentum of his body had climbed to the peak. He knew very well that today's matter could not be easily solved, and the battle in front of him could not be avoided, and even he was very clear that with his current strength, facing any one of the splits alone, he had the capital to resist, but in the face of three, he did not dare to say that he could win it, let alone Liang standing behind the three splits. Steve's heart was sinking, but at the same time, the momentum was constantly rising, and after the strengthening of the experiment, he had already distinguished himself from the original Steve. That Steve is tough, hot-blooded, and upright, and these advantages he has inherited, but at the same time there have been different changes, but as for what changes, it is estimated that he himself is not clear. Die. Killing broke the stalemate, his mind was once again filled with the desire to kill at this time, facing the enemy, he was naturally the first to charge, and his movement was really not small, the forward momentum pierced the air, bringing up a wave of sound, the speed of a moment had exceeded the speed of sound, the sonic boom vibrated violently, and the instant killing had already killed Steve in front of him. Killing is one of Steve's splits. After experimental transformation, the body has a variety of mutant abilities, a variety of attack methods, physical fitness is even stronger and amazing, a shot is a fierce attack. There is no fixed routine for killing, because these are only Leon did not teach him, so cautious fighting, are to follow instinct, to recruit fatal, every time frightened. His slightest blow will bring wind and thunder and lightning, and it is as if he is in the center of a thunderstorm in mid-air, lightning and thunder, and a strong momentum tears the air and emits a terrifying whistling sound. In the face of the killing attack, Steve's defense is the most capable, not wasting half of the energy, but breaking a sense of lightness with clever breaking power, which is very sensitive in lightning and thunder. Then the distortion also suddenly entered the battle circle, he was like a beast, suddenly rushed into the battle group, directly inserted a foot, and attacked Steve at once, disrupting his defense at once. And whether Steve is a person who has been changed through experiments, or the main body of the four, the combat effectiveness is naturally extraordinary, even if the defensive rhythm is disrupted, it does not show any decline, so he directly let go of his hands and feet, and also let Liang see what his abilities are. The first is deformation. Steve does not have that iconic shield on his body, now it is all fist and foot kung fu plus mutant ability, a shot is a wild wind, ice, and snow drifting zero, the cold wind seems to freeze the space, so that the killing and distortion of the action becomes slightly sluggish, followed by the same wind and thunder, and the killing of hard shake. Boom. The battle became extremely terrifying from the very beginning, it was all three people fighting each other, causing a huge movement, within a 2-kilometer radius of the high sky, there were winds and snow, as well as rolling clouds, and the wind and thunder stirring on the three people. The three of them come from one body, that is to say, the ability of the killing will also be distorted, and the ability of these two will naturally be owned by Steve, and even in the use of ability, he is more skilled than the two of them. This caused the movement of the three people fighting, directly beyond the imagination of normal people, and the collisions again and again were like bomb explosions, roaring, full of energy, and thunder rolling. At this time, corruption quietly struck, and the water vapor and smoke around him condensed into a silk thread, and the silence had surrounded the position of the three people. Although there was a soft pop, the silk-like water vapor condensate suddenly exploded, instantly turning into a mist to envelop all three of them. The air rippled for it, and a strong corrosive force spread in the field. This is completely controlled by the corrupt force, so under his control, this corrupt force does not harm killing and distortion, but all of it acts on Steve. Ahem. Steve suddenly groaned in pain, bare blood on my epidermis, and the power suit on his body became torn in this moment, and he was hurt by this corrosive force. But as mentioned earlier, the ability that the split body has, he naturally has, the ability to corrupt, Steve also has, so he just turned his mind, and the same power gushed out of his body, blocking out the strange corrupt force, and even gradually neutralizing it. But this kind of corruption ability, in the end is the focus of corruption itself. The use of corruption ability is naturally beyond Steve, so he increased investment at this time, and for a time the corruption force also suppressed Steve. The three of them joined forces. Naturally the Steve was beaten back one by one, and there would be scars on his body from time to time, but they healed and recovered in a blink of an eye, and the resilience was extremely amazing. And Leon watched the four people fighting from a distance. Such a force was indeed standing on the apex of the earth, and there were indeed not many people who could hurt or even kill them, and the fight between the four people did not look like anything to him, but in the eyes of others, it was really a fairy fight. Episode 119, Washington, D.C., in a secluded conference room, was sitting in it, and as before, this time they were still discussing something, but they were suddenly startled by the huge movement over Washington. What happened? An old man with a shoulder strap will star ask. General, 2,000 meters above the city, mutants are fighting. Immediately, a meeting assistant looked like someone responded. Are mutants fighting on it? Find out now. Go now. The general quickly ordered. Yes. The man took the order and left, and after a moment there was a result, and when he returned, he turned on the monitor in the conference room and said, General, it has been ascertained that there are 5 people in the sky, and one of them is. It's Leon. His voice trembled a little, indicating that he had a certain fear of the name itself. What? The general stood up and snapped, is he going to attack Washington? The assistant's face became a little strange at this time, and he hurriedly said, No, General, I have not yet seen whether the other side is ready to attack Washington, but those who are fighting, but it was the same person. What do you mean? The person who opened his mouth was another general-like person. The assistant hurriedly said, except for Leon, there are a total of 4 people in the melee, and these 4 people look exactly the same, there is no difference in the slightest. Quartets? Someone wondered. No, not the quadruplets, that guy's looks, most likely Captain Colonel Steve Rogers. At this time, the monitor was turned on, and some of the pictures were revealed, and he stopped and hurriedly said, this is the battle screen in the sky. The scene of the fight above is revealed, the 4 Steve fighting together, extremely fast, although the camera is sometimes difficult to keep up with this speed, but it is still filmed in the front. When the people in the conference room see the appearance of the 4 people, they can't help but become silent. The general who spoke first looked at the scene in the picture with some confusion, and only then did he sigh and say, you don't have to guess, those 4 people are all Steve. But which is the real captain of the United States, it is still impossible to know. I never thought that the captain of the United States would have such a powerful and terrifying power. General, according to our observation, 3 of the 4 people are obviously besieging one person. Do you think that the person who is besieged will be the captain of the United States himself? Of all the people here, only you have worked with Captain Miko, and you should know him a little bit. The assistant asked suddenly. The general was slightly silent, and then shook his head. I can't tell if such a thing is beyond my understanding. But now is not the time to go to the captain of the national team, but to determine whether these people will attack Washington next. Especially that Leon, what is he going to do? In addition, first inform the surrounding garrison of the defensive forces, let them pay attention, but do not cause Leon's main one. The general commanded. Yes. The assistant got the order and quickly withdrew. At this time, there were still a few people left in the conference room, but basically all of them were people with the rank of general. The atmosphere was very silent. They were basically insiders of the experiment of the captain of the United States, and naturally knew the real situation of the 4 captains of the United States in the sky. The general who spoke first a moment later said, of the 4 divisions of Rogers before, the only one who was still sober ran to Huaxia, and the government let that split enter the Kunlun Mountains through relations, and now it seems that the one that was besieged should be the one who went to Huaxia. Someone nodded, it doesn't look wrong, but the other 3, I think it is very likely that they have become Liang's helpers, or even have been accepted by him. The others were silent, and it was not difficult to see that the mere fact that the 3 were besieging one person while Liang was still watching from a distance was already very telling. So, what are we going to do to resist Leon? And those three schizmos? Someone asked. The atmosphere was still silent, and everyone knew the horror of Leon, which was not at all the category of human war, but more like the appearance of all mankind facing a god. Very incomprehensible and desperate. There is no doubt that the captain of the United States enhancement experiment has failed, but at least one of them is sane and seems to be much stronger than the legitimate captain of the United States, which is also the only consolation award. But this still doesn't make a decisive difference, so I suggest starting a backup plan for the final weapon. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere of silence became more solemn, and someone said, "This is likely to be our last resort. Are we sure to start implementing it now?" The general nodded silently. "Now that it is a critical moment, there is not much time left for us, and we can no longer have half a hesitation. Compared to the captain of the United States experiment, this backup plan is much safer. We can try it completely." At this time, no one opened their mouths again, but they were all thinking. After a moment, someone finally raised his hand and said, "Let's start the backup plan for the final weapon. We have no choice." The others looked at each other and nodded along with them. "Then let's start this experiment." After the negotiation, everyone turned their heads to look at the screen again, and the fight between the four Steve in the picture had not stopped, but they could already see the decline of the besieged. "That man is going to lose." As the man who opened his mouth said, at this time, in the sky, Steve flashed left and right, under the siege of killing, corruption and distortion, had become precarious, and it seemed that he would not be able to hold out for long. Liang still had a good time watching. He didn't have the slightest look of intervening, and he didn't care about whether he was dead or alive. The ripples of space became more frequent and intense, the corrosive smoke had spread for nearly a kilometer, and the movement brought by the killing was also echoing in hundreds of meters, and the abnormal changes were followed by the death of Steve. "Almost." Leon muttered softly, killing as if he had heard his words, and swooped up and circled to Steven's side, breaking his defenses with one blow. Episode 120. Suddenly, the wind and thunder in the middle of the air dispersed, like a cannonball being suddenly detonated, erupting into violent energy fluctuations, instantaneous fire splashes, strong air currents spread around like a tornado, and the rumbling sonic boom seemed to make the heavens and the earth vibrate. Steve's arms were strangely bent, obviously broken, and several deep wounds had been torn out of the chest position, which were almost visible and bloody, as if to tear his whole body into two sections. Even such injuries had only recovered from Steve in a moment, and when he withdrew from the group, he only gasped twice, and then all the injuries on his body recovered as before, except for his tattered clothes. He could not see any other injuries at all. This ability is really amazing. Even Leon looked at it. It was obvious that the recovery ability of the four people was very strong, far from the healing factors like Wolverine and saber-toothed tiger. With 1 against 4, Steve was obviously somewhat invincible, but at this time he did not show any intention of retreating, even if he knew that he was invincible. He also launched another charge at the three divisions. Boom. Another collision, the same shock, the horror of all the people in that secret office, and Leon retreated a little further, making room for the four of them, curious about the means of the four, while also carefully observing and recording. The four of them were obviously split into one, but the fight was fatal, especially killing and distortion, and the two joined forces to hit tons of damage, and the main injuries on Steve's body were basically caused by them. Only corruption, his ability is too sinister to be invincible, but fortunately, Steve can also somewhat neutralize its corrosive power, otherwise it is estimated that he would have lost a long time ago. But even if he insists, no matter how he insists, in fact, the defeat has long been revealed, from the initial attack and defense of 2 arrivals, to the final attack and defense of less. His state is getting worse and worse, gradually breathing like a cow, the beads of sweat on his body are constantly dripping, and the injuries on his body are getting more and more serious. Finally, Steve seemed to be unable to make it, and was stabbed in the abdomen by the killing hand, and then fanned out by a distortion slap, flipping in midair and falling into the distance, spilling blood all the way. The 3 people of killing, deformation and corruption naturally will not let him go. For the 3 people, Steve is a great supplement. As long as it is swallowed, its own ability can grow again, so seeing Steve defeated, the 3 of them invariably pounced on it at the same time. Liang's brow frowned slightly. He vaguely felt that Steve could not be swallowed by the 3 people so simply, and when he was about to stop it, he saw Steve flying out. His body suddenly trembled, and then expanded rapidly, instantly like a bomb exploded in front of the eyes of the 3 people, and blood and broken bones suddenly burst out. Boom. An earth-shaking boom resounded throughout the heavens and the earth. Such an explosion was extremely powerful, and the shock wave of an instant included the 3 people, and Liang saw that the 3 people were covered with invisible forces, as if there was a blade acting on the body, and the flesh and blood blurred in an instant. What was even more strange was that the flesh and blood of those explosions did not disperse, but turned into a fine powder, quickly wrapping the 3 people, as if they were wise, directly contaminating the 3 people's bodies. Liang's eyes narrowed, and only then did he understand Steve's intentions. The previous death-defying and bloody battles were all fake, and it was for this step that he actually wanted to forcibly devour these three people with his own flesh and blood. Leon didn't know exactly how Steve would devour the three of them, but looking at the spiritual flesh and blood, he knew that the crux of the matter lay in these flesh and blood. Visible to the naked eye, all the flesh and blood that were contaminated with the three people quickly penetrated into the bodies of the three people, and from a distance, it looked like water had been heated and evaporated, and some hot steam came out, and then the bodies of the three people changed. Their bodies began to proliferate, and many body tissues appeared, including hands and feet, and even many heads growing out, which looked extremely frightening. From a distance, killing, decaying and deforming, the three of them were like three monsters. They had completely lost their human form, and the tissues that had grown on their bodies were changing more and more, and the three of them also let out a painful roar. This roar is like a beast, full of painful meaning, and people who don't know it still think that the three people are enduring some kind of torture. Liang flashed in front of the killing body, and at this time, the killing had become a large ball of meat more than 3 meters high, with his hands, feet, head and other body tissues exposed, and from time to time there was blood squeezed out, which looked very terrifying. But what Liang had in his eyes was just curiosity, but there was no look of concern. Others don't know, but he is very clear when he is shaping the personality and self-perception of the three people, but he has added a lot of bootlegs to it. If Steve has the ability to directly make the sanity and personality of the three people collapse in an instant, it is okay, so the impact will be reduced to the minimum. But if this is not possible, then it is really impossible to say who will swallow who in the end. As soon as his thoughts moved, a little reddish light on his body rushed to the monster in front of him to envelop it, and then the latter instantly became still, as if someone had suddenly pressed the pause button. Leon's thoughts went deep into the monster's body, and began to observe from the microscopic level, and in his line of sight, he saw that the flesh and blood of the two were blending with each other, and on the one hand was Steve's flesh and blood, obviously with his own control, showing a large-scale and situational invasion. The other side is the flesh and blood of the killing itself, which can only appear passive defense, but in a short period of time, it is invaded by Steve's flesh and blood, and little by little, it is defeated. Looking deeper again, he saw a change in the cellular level. Both of their cells are very active, but Steve's cell activity is incomparable, and Leon feels a kind of intelligent spirituality from Steve's cells, which makes him intuitively figure out the reason. Emotional Steve is already able to control the cell-level substance, which is obviously better than killing them. Episode 121. When a person has the ability to manipulate microscopic matter, then the person can arbitrarily combine what he wants, and if a person can control the molecular level of matter, then his ability can combine more and more refined things, and when a person can master subatomic level matter, then he can combine almost everything. Leon is now able to manipulate subatomic level matter, and his strength is beyond doubt, while Steve can now manipulate cell-level microscopic matter, and this level of manipulation ability has been possessed by Leon when he was still in the early stage of the second level of Phoenix power. But there are not many, or very few, people on the entire Earth who can achieve this, and although the ability to kill, decay and deformity is extremely powerful, it has not reached this level of refinement at the level of material control, so it is very difficult to resist Steve's self-flesh and blood invasion. Leon was the old god who was observing, and did not intervene to stop it. In his opinion, even if the three people really called Steve to devour, he was equally capable of separating the four people again. What he wanted to see now was what kind of means Steve had to devour these three people. The three deformed monsters were writhing in midair, the proliferation sites above them were getting more and more, and the size was getting bigger and bigger, and when Leon unlocked the control of the monster in front of him, the three monsters began to attract each other and quickly collided with each other. Then the mutations between the three began to interact and then merge with each other, and over time, the three monsters became a much larger monster. This monster was a huge ball of flesh with a radius of almost 15 meters, which looked extremely deformed and terrible, and even added some indescribable organs on it, dragging the elders, and no one would have thought that such a decent figure as Steve would actually produce such a terrible change when he fused with the split. In Leon's observation, it can be seen that the two forces in these flesh and blood are entangled and conflicting with each other, and in this case, they devour and merge with each other. One is killing, hatching and distortion, and the other is Steve. With absolute pressure, Steve let the three people's control over flesh and blood gradually retreat, and soon most of the flesh and blood had been swallowed up by it, and they had almost attacked the core of the brains where the three finally stored only the three. Time passed in the blink of an eye and more than 10 minutes passed. The original 15 meters radius of the strange deformity has become more and more vicious and terrible. The size has also expanded more than doubled. In other words, ordinary people cannot understand at all the energy of the flesh and blood of these limbs comes from. But Liang is clear that the four people themselves have extremely powerful power, but also can absorb the free energy around them at all times, so the law of conservation of energy has not been broken in them. At some point, Steve's intrusion finally reaches the core of the trio's brain, where Leon's personality and self-perception designed for the trio are stored, and an individual's observations of the world all originate. At this moment, the expanding deformed body suddenly stopped moving, and even its own suspension could not be maintained, and it fell towards the earth violently. Such a huge ball of flesh and blood, Leon could easily lift it in midair, but he did not do so, but watched the thing fall. 2 or 3,000 meters in the air, coupled with air resistance, this thing landed on the ground only took about 40 seconds. Below is the downtown area of Washington, D.C., high-rise buildings, lined up, a bustling scene. Boom! With a loud noise, the meatball smashed directly on a street, and in a flash, like a snowball falling from a high altitude, it directly exploded, instantly turning into countless clusters of blood and flesh splashes, staining most of the streets with blood red, and the bloody gas was pervasive, looking extremely disgusting. Leon followed along, looking at the flesh and blood wreckage, and in the midst of the wreckage lay a naked man, naturally in Steve's form, but at this time his eyes were closed, as if he were unconscious. Leon floated to his side, a pale red light flickering in his eyes, and his thoughts penetrated deep into the man's mind, and he saw a strange sight. In this person's mind, the 4 personalities are merging with each other, seemingly regardless of each other, of which Steve's original personality is the most powerful, and the killing, corruption, and distortion are eliminated by Steve's personality little by little. Leon looked at him coldly, without any movement, but with an inexplicable smile on his face. He knew that the time had almost come. Sure enough, when his thought arose, Steve's body suddenly trembled, like an epilepsy, his body twitched and twisted, his eyes were watching, his eyeballs were turning around, and his whole body was stained with scarlet blood, which looked extremely frightening. And in the deepest part of his mind, in the area where this personality was stored, a thought bomb was being detonated. This thinking bomb is the backhand planted by Leon on the 3 people, and if there is an external force that affects the personality and cognition of the 3 people, then this thinking bomb will explode like a bomb, and then turn into a thinking virus, directly infected to the source of this force. In the whole Earth, the only person who can compete with Leon in terms of mind and humanity is Professor X, and in fact, Professor X is no longer his opponent, and in the use of psychic ability, Leon is also the first person to deserve it. The power of the Phoenix itself can easily change a person's personality and reason, and such an ability, coupled with Liang's own manipulation methods, wants to do something in the depths of a person's mind, it is really very easy. Not to mention that the personalities of the 3 people who killed, corrupted and distorted were themselves endowed by him, which was like he had installed a system with blank computer hardware, and at the same time, he had left a secret door in this system. This is quite frightening, at least Steve crashed into it without knowing anything, just triggering the insurance mechanism in the personality of the 3. Countless kinds of negative emotions are erupting at this time, which is infecting Steve's originally pure personality little by little. If you really want to make a metaphor, it is like the virus left by Leon, which is infecting Steve, and Steve's personality is being left with a variety of negative emotions, which are eating away at the sanity of this personality little by little, and changing this personality little by little. Episode 122. The Steve in front of him was covered in blood, his body trembled like chaff in a sieve, and the uncontrolled energy that escaped enveloped the entire block. Under this force, all kinds of strange scenes appeared on the streets, such as flames that appeared out of thin air, began to burning a large area of the ground red, and in a moment it turned into lava. There was also the sudden appearance of lightning, with Steve's body as the origin, spreading out in all directions, and the street lamps and the billboards of the roadside shops all sparked in this instant. More intense thick clouds, condensed thousands of meters above the sky, and a moment later there was already a thick water vapor scoop falling, enveloping most of the downtown Washington area, and in a moment it became a water pool. The change is not only that, like suddenly emerging from somewhere a large space rift, directly cutting the walls of some buildings, or even cutting a hole in the building. There are also inexplicable substances produced and transformed, and then uncontrollably, combined into some strange substances. These substances are somewhat like steel, but want to be fluid. From a distance it looks like a jelly with a steel color, which is the product of fantasy. However, Leon knew that under this ability, many things were uncontrollable, and he also saw Steve's potential, or all the potential after the combination of 4 splits. Seeing this, he couldn't help but see the hunter's heart, and he was even more certain to these 4 people. Yes, he not only wanted to leave behind killing, corruption, and distortion, but even Steve himself did not want to let go. He even had a codename for Steve. Looking up slightly, there were strange snowflakes falling in the line of sight. These snowflakes were condensed from the water vapor under the extremely cold air, because in this instant, Steve's ability to run away froze the entire block, and it was no longer rain that fell, but ice and snowflakes, and large lumps of ice. Sigh, how many abilities is fused here? In other words, I don't dare to be so sad. Americans really can play, can be called foreigners less series. Leon could see the death of those experimenters, and he looked sideways at them. This ability went on for a long time, and it didn't end after more than 10 minutes, and after Leon dug his thoughts deep into Steve's mind, he saw the extent of the virus infection in his thinking. Leon mixed all the negative emotions throughout human history, about war, killing, evil, deception, lust, jealousy and greed, which can be said to encompass all the negativity and evil. Infected by such a thinking virus, the personality of any ordinary person will become the most negative personality in the world, and even a person as tenacious as Steve is still unable to fall below this invasion. After all, this thinking virus broke out directly from the depths of his personality, and without someone like Professor X who manipulated the mind to help defend it, the infection was simply irreversible. Leon knew that Steve did have the ability to manipulate the mind, and this ability was likely to come from Professor X's gene, and he didn't know how the American authorities got the bald gene. That's why Steve had been resisting in this state for so long, but now it seemed that this psychic ability could not continue to resist, because Leon had discovered that the core area of Steve's thinking had basically been infected. His thoughts were directly projected in his thoughts, and he immediately felt that he was in a strange space, surrounded by various memory fragments, including Steve's past and his dreams, and in these pictures, there were more or less changes, and there were many very negative things on them. For example, the wars and killings that Steve experienced during World War II, the people who were killed by his own hands, the screaming people, the vicious faces, and the trajectory of his growth since childhood, the chaotic neighborhoods, the restless crowds, and the turmoil in the whole society. And the darkness he saw, shootings, fights, insults, and trampling. These negative things have completely overwhelmed the glorious side of other people's humanity and become the main melody that makes up his personality at this time. Very well, I'll give you another insurance. Thinking like this, Leon used his telepathic ability to plant a seed in his mind that could not betray him, which was the most intuitive control of the mind, tampering with his cognition and confusing his reason. There is a killing, corruption, and distortion of the personality foundation. To do this step is also very simple, less than 5 minutes to complete the step, and then he directly split the fused personality again, redivided it into 4 subjects. It's done. Leon retreated from his mental body, and at this moment, with his withdrawal, Steve's ability to run wild finally stopped, and the chaos ended in this instant, out of the frozen street, as if there had never been chaos. Steve's figure slowly floated up, facing Leon, and he opened his eyes, and there was a chaos in his eyes, as if there were a pair of vortexes, trying to absorb everything in the world. Ah! Steve suddenly looked up and let out a long roar, and the sound was like thunder, rumbling out of the distance. Then his body began to tremble, and suddenly protrusions appeared on his bare body, and some protrusions became more and more, and then there was hyperplastic tissue, first a hand, then an arm, and then half of the body. It was splitting, a new individual struggling to grow out of his body, opening his mouth wide open, his mouth screaming uncontrollably, his eyes blood red. This is killing, the killing of new births. It split directly from his body, roared and stopped, and then stood quietly in front of Leon. Then there was the second schism, the split from Steve's body, the same process, the same weirdness, the eyes a deep blackness, which was corruption, the same new decay. The third split out of nature is distorted, and in the eyes is Sinsen's coldness, which makes people chill through the heart. At this moment, standing in front of Leon were 4 identical people, all of whom were Steve, and the changes in his body had stopped, and there was nothing strange about his flat eyes. But Leon saw a dead silence in his eyes, and a kind of madness, a mixture of 2 extremes. The host. He knelt down on one knee and offered loyalty to Leon. Very well, from now on, you will be called depraved. Episode 123, Degradation represents a man of the times, from a superhero to a supercriminal, becoming a subordinate of Leon, the great demon king, and will only be because of his commanding actions in the future. There will no longer be the fortitude and courage and integrity of the past, and some are only cruel and evil. Since then, there has been no captain in the world, only the depravity of Liang's men. Killing, corruption, distortion, and degeneration are the 4 heavenly kings under Liang. The 4 people in front of them have the same face, but they each have different characteristics, and their respective ability focuses are not the same. The ability to kill, corrupt and deform does not need to be described too much. After experiencing fusion and separation, their own ability has also improved, and the degenerate as the main body among them, the ability is also the most prominent. He didn't have any ability to focus, or rather, all the mutant abilities he possessed were focused on him, and although he didn't dare say all-powerful, he was the most comprehensive of the 4. This is also the reason why Liang has a crush on him. This is an extremely powerful special talent, which Liang needs now. At this time, the 4 people stood in front of him lined up, the breath intertwined with each other. There was an extremely compelling sense of heaviness, and there was a sharpness, like a sharp blade, that is, a sharp edge that Yi Hong could not hide at all, just like a sharp knife. If an ordinary person faced them, he would definitely be scared out of the urine by the momentum of the 4 people. Captain Migwa has become a thing of the past, and in the future, what will appear in front of the world will be the 4 heavenly kings under Liang's seat. It is strange to say that several people have made such a big move, but this street is a dead silence, from the beginning to the present, not even half a figure has been seen, unlike the prosperity that Leon has seen before, everything is like an illusion. He looked up in a certain direction, and from there he could feel a sense of peeping, and he knew that there must be someone watching him over there, and maybe even the presence of a camera. But he didn't bother to look into it, there was no need for that, he had destroyed the entire world's financial system, and he had destroyed the oil system, and now the situation in the whole world was very chaotic, indicating that although order was still maintained, many people knew that if this order were to be struck again, it would absolutely collapse directly. Leon's role now is that of the man who wants to disrupt the final order. Let's go, we should go back, to bring some new changes to the world. Until now, the changes in human society have not been able to meet my expectations. It seems that we have to increase some pressure. Liang smiled lightly. Then he waved his hand in the direction of spying on him, and smiled. This was the first time he had shown such a strange smile in front of people, and when the picture was transmitted back to the conference room, it made everyone present break out in a cold sweat, afraid that he was going to attack Washington directly, and if that was the case, they really did not have the best means to resist now. The combat troops of human society are something that can be destroyed by Liang with a wave of his hand, and those mutant heroes are vulnerable in front of them, even mutant leaders such as Professor X and Magneto. There is no way to take Liang, and the reality is extremely desperate. Everyone in the conference room had a culmination in their hearts, afraid that Leon would really attack Washington directly at this time, but fortunately, Leon just showed a strange smile and did not do anything else. Then he saw Leon break the space with a wave of his hand, and the space-time passage appeared, and he took the lead in stepping into it, followed by the 4 people of depravity, killing, corruption, and distortion. When the empty passage disappeared, all the people in the conference room breathed a sigh of relief. Gentlemen, we cannot delay any longer. In the face of such an enemy, if we do not show all our preparations, then we will not be able to pay him at all. This is the most terrifying man ever, his strength is beyond everyone's imagination. Will the Star Old Man Dow? It is true that in the end, the weapons backup plan must start quickly and strive to produce practical and effective results in the shortest possible time. Someone echoed it. Well, let's first select a laboratory in the name of the military, and this experiment must be attached to our military, otherwise it would be ridiculous that the old masters of Congress, in this dangerous situation, are still talking about human rights and freedoms. Some people nod their heads, and it is true that in this world, as they say, even if the order of the whole country can only be barely stable now, there are still people who insist on human rights and freedoms, as if in the eyes of these people, freedom is above all else, and their rights must not be tarnished by the state. These Leon never paid attention to it, his power can shake everything, and this ridiculous rule between people is useless in his opinion. And what annoys those who do these marches is precisely the disgusting atmosphere in the Congress, which is clear that the country is on the verge of collapse, but there are still people who stick to this. Well, then decide, this laboratory must be firmly controlled by the military. If there is opposition from Congress, let him oppose it, and if necessary, send soldiers to control the laboratory. It's better than being ordered by Congressional Grandpa and the President to waste a lot of time, and now time is key. The people in the lab then began to discuss the specific plan for the matter, while Leon had returned to New York with the 4 of them. At this time, New York was basically occupied by soldiers, the whole of New York City had become an empty city, and the resources of the entire city belonged to Leon alone, and he had already issued an order to Svija to use the resources in the city to strengthen himself. The resources in New York City, if nothing else, steel alone, are already an extremely terrifying amount, and if they are all gathered, the materials that can be refined can make the number of soldiers increase by 100-fold and 1,000 times. It's just that the special liquid metal synthesis created by Leon is very difficult, and the process is complicated by scientific and technological means, so Svija's main job now is to design a set of highly efficient production bases for synthesizing materials to strengthen the army of soldiers. Now, the design of this production base has been completed, entering the construction stage. As long as the construction is completed, the growth of the warrior team can enter the fast lane. At that time, all the soldiers united to be the real war network. Episode 125. This robot clearly has traces of the Asgardian destroyer, and it is obvious that these robots must have been improved from the original destruction of the destroyer. No wonder when Thor finally came to challenge himself, there were no 6 destroyers around him, and the feelings were handed over to the American authorities, but when did they hook up? Is it possible that the American authorities and Asgard have secretly reached an agreement? Leon was curious, but he didn't delve too deeper, which was obvious, perhaps because of his previous persecution of Odin, which made him feel a sense of crisis, as if his existence itself was a threat to some people. If that's the case, get a few robots back and study it, Svija, and leave it to you to do it, and finish it as fast as you can. The 2 commanded. Okay, sir. Spija was meticulous in the execution of the quantity's orders, and then the screen of light in front of his eyes disappeared. It's time to move your muscles too. Liang smiled lightly. The power of his mind radiated out, rising high into the sky, deep into the cosmic space, far away from the Earth's orbit. He found the asteroid that he had pulled out of the asteroid belt, and was rushing towards the Earth at a high speed. At this rate, it should have been several days before the asteroid would pierce the atmosphere and hit Earth, but he didn't bother to wait now. Accelerate. His current mind control is so strong, even an asteroid of this size can be easily pulled. In fact, there is no need for mind power control at all, only need to use the ability of electromagnetic force control a little. You can make the asteroid with the iron and nickel core begin to accelerate. According to the current asteroid travel speed, it can be reached in more than a day, that is, at most tomorrow afternoon. This iron-nickel core asteroid with a diameter of more than 3,000 meters will directly impact down. The target chosen by Leon for him is still Kansas, which is the central region of the United States, which can radiate to the surrounding places. Asteroids with a diameter of 3,000 meters of iron-nickel core, impacting at a super high speed, the United States will die, and under the chain reaction, the whole of North America will fall into a state of destruction. Wait a little longer, the chain reaction will be further expanded. When volcanoes around the world will erupt, volcanic ash will drift to every corner of the world with the atmosphere, lock in sunlight, the temperature will plummet, and the Earth will enter the winter. Then things will be reversed, and after a longer period of time, these volcanic ash will overabsorb the sun's heat, the Earth's surface will be filled with a variety of harmful and toxic gases, and when the time comes, the greenhouse effect will accumulate and rise, and the surface temperature will climb to a point where living things cannot survive in the shortest possible time. This is the terrible disaster brought about by an asteroid, and I believe that the current speed of this asteroid will definitely make all countries shudder. Since you are still doing this, then I have to let you feel the pressure well. Don't say that I can't do it properly. For the role of this villain boss, I can work very seriously and hard. Last night, Leon cast his eyes into the sky, his gaze penetrating the obstruction of clouds and the atmosphere, and seeing directly into the depths of cosmic space. In his eyes, the asteroid was rapidly enlarged. With its potholed exterior, dark gray and icy color, and uneven geology, this asteroid is one of the largest in the asteroid belt, and Leon chose it because of his iron-nickel core. A large iron lump fell from the sky, so terrifying in size and quality that it was enough to destroy the world. Liang's mind was moving, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. Let me surprise humanity all over the world again. In this way, the magnetic control ability is exerted, acting on the asteroid, and suddenly the asteroid that was still rolling fixes the action. And as his ability continues to increase, the force acting on the asteroid is also getting stronger and stronger. As a result, the shape of the asteroid began to change. This asteroid is an iron-nickel core, the surface is wrapped in a layer of rock and ice, and the mass of the iron-nickel layer accounts for more than 90% of the total mass of the entire asteroid. After more than 10 minutes, the asteroid became a moon, the inner iron-nickel core was heated, and the water vapor hidden under the rock layer was suddenly evaporated, gushing out of the cracks in the surface. 20 minutes later, the rock layer fell off, and if there was an observatory on Earth at this time, you would see the asteroid dragging a long comet tail, as if it had split itself, and its appearance had been reduced by one layer. 30 minutes later, the water vapor disappeared, revealing the reddish iron-nickel layer inside, and because of its own mass, the asteroid did not reach hydrostatic equilibrium, so the appearance was an irregular shape, looking like a rough cigar. And now, because it is heated rapidly by magnetic control, it makes itself soft. Because of the gravitational relationship of mass, it quickly becomes a large ball with a diameter of about 2,300 meters, and it is almost standard far, which naturally includes the reason why Leon manipulates the magnetic force. After a few more minutes, the entire asteroid cooled, and the appearance showed a bright silver color, which was much higher than before, and I believe that people on the Earth can see this rapidly attacking asteroid as long as they are not blind. And that's not all. Leon's bad taste is not just a little bit. He then used his ability to stop the asteroid's rotation, keeping one side facing Earth, and then carved it out on it. First of all, the eyes, followed by the mouth, no nose and ears, a complete cartoon painting with simple lines. If there is a Chinese person in the past life here, you can see the meaning represented by the smiling face at a glance. Comical. A big funny smiley face is coming towards the Earth at a very high speed. Leon did more than just that, he even colored the asteroid, making the original bright silver color turn yellow, and the eyes and mouth were pitch black, so that under the background of the universe, the asteroid also became eye-catching enough. Looking at his masterpiece, he laughed very badly and lacked morality. Episode 126. A standard spherical asteroid with a diameter of more than 2,000 meters, a pale yellow funny smiley expression, appeared in the universe so suddenly, anyone who saw it would doubt life. What the hell is that? This is the first thought in the minds of all those who have observed this asteroid at this moment. Yes, this asteroid appeared too suddenly, and its original body, the asteroid that was heading towards the Earth, itself was always receiving the attention of many observatories around the world, and after seeing the asteroid have changed, the result made everyone stunned. The funny face is extremely famous in the Earth of the past life, as long as it is the patience of contacting the internet, almost no one does not know this expression, which can be said to be globally famous. But this is the Marvel Universe world, this yellow strange smiley face is the first time to appear, and the scene that appears is so frightening. The people who observe this change are only a signal that Leon expressed to the world, but what kind of signal it is, no one can understand. After Leon did this, he didn't care, but it was bitter to those who analyzed it. Some intelligence services quickly mobilized and began to analyze the meaning of this expression, but after half a day of not coming to an accurate conclusion, but individuals could see the irony on that expression. At this time, in the combat conference room of the United States for Leon, the military, intelligence, congressmen, government officials, and even the president had gathered, and they were listening to all kinds of people reporting and analyzing, but they never came to a conclusion. What the hell is that? Can any of you answer for me? It's the president who speaks, and he's very flaming right now. Because someone suddenly told him that the Earth had more than a day to destroy, who could accept it? Especially if it is the president of a country like him, the pressure can be imagined. Now, there is nothing the United States can do with Leon's threat, and new dangers appear in space, and the time is pressed for this president to want to curse. Mr. President, that was what Leon made right, and I now think it's very likely that we are overinterpreting. A man said directly. This statement made everyone stunned, and some people couldn't help but follow this point of view to think next, yes. It is likely that we have overinterpreted. Leon has never thought of communicating with any country, organization, or individual from the beginning of the attack, he is always maverick. Behaviorists analyze his motives as interested, psychologists see it as the result of his inner desire to conquer, and politicians see him as trying to dominate the world and become the master of the world. But whether Leon will behave against the world or not, this is something that no one knows. You go on. The president's road. The man came to the monitor, pointed to the funny face on it, and said, "This is a kind of network emoji, a special internet term, although we have looked for all the emojis on the network, and we have not found an expression similar to this expression, but this can only mean that it is Liang's original. I venture to assume that the reason why he made the asteroid like this may be because of his own bad taste, and please see." He enlarged the picture, and then he could see several lines of handwriting in the lower left corner of the funny round face. Funny. Comique. Lustig. These are Chinese, English, Japanese, French, German, Russian, and the words in these different languages translate to one meaning, which is funny. Everyone's face became a little strange, not people looking at each other, so everyone really thought that Leon was probably doing this out of bad taste. The man continued, "The two may not have any intention of expressing anything to us at all, but after countless analyses, all of us know that Leon's strength cannot be matched by any one country alone, and that he is an invincible being on the entire Earth, and that such a person, all the rules of conduct, will only depend on his personal preferences. That is to say, he does not have a comparison table to communicate with us, and there is no need to explain anything like us. He is doing, we are suffering, it is as simple as that." Some people can't help but sigh, and some people hate it. In the face of Leon, everyone has a sense of powerlessness, even the world's most powerful United States. It is also unable to resist Leon. This sense of powerlessness makes everyone very uncomfortable. Abominable. Someone slapped the table viciously. Many people agree with that person's statement. Think about it carefully. Liang is now powerful, and he really doesn't need to say anything to them at all. Everything he does, people all over the world can only passively bear. And such a big funny face also fully demonstrates the unscrupulous behavior of Leon, which is simply a rule of destruction, and he alone plunges the entire world into chaos and turmoil, which is more dangerous than any known dangerous person in human history. So what do we do now? It is still the president who opens his mouth. Everyone was meditating, or in silence, because at this time, in the face of such a large asteroid falling, they could not come up with any practical and effective way. An asteroid with a diameter of more than 2,000 meters, you are a real asteroid, not a meteor or something, then a behemoth falls, the atmosphere cannot burn it down, not to mention it is still an iron and nickel core, no one can return to the existing weapons can destroy it. Or shall we have a nuclear bomb into the universe right now, and try to blast and intercept it? Someone proposed. The person who spoke was stared at by others with a look like a fool, which made the person who opened his mouth angry. How? Am I wrong? Shut up and damn it, do you know what the speed of that thing is? Which kind of missiles can do this level of interception? Someone despised. So what do you say we should do? The rebuttal was dumbfounded. At this time, the military suddenly said, perhaps, it is time for us to ask those people to help us. Subscribe please. Episode 127. The people mentioned by the military made most of the people present wonder, and the president was shocked when he heard the words, and then he thought for a while before saying, at the end of this meeting, except for the people of the general level and the people of S.H.I.E.L.D., everyone else has left, and the next meeting is top secret, and you have no right to participate. All the deputies and officials present changed their faces, but they didn't say much, just got up with different faces and left the venue, and in the blink of an eye, there would be more than a dozen people left in the large venue, except for the president and a few admirals. Nick Fury was among them. He seemed to have guessed what was going on, and there was no expression on his dark face. How did the backup plan for the final weapons work? The president asked. A general said, the effect is very good, compared to Liang's soldiers, the combat effectiveness of a single has exceeded a lot, and the laboratory has only developed the second model. I believe it will not be long before mass production. Very good, you continue to work hard, don't let my efforts be in vain, but I have worked a lot of effort to make the old stubborn people in Congress shut up. The president's road. We will. The admiral nodded. Speaking of you, have you developed any powerful weapons? The president asked Nick Fury. The latter sighed for a moment and then shook his head. I'm sorry, Mr. President, judging by the current situation of all the laboratories under S.H.I.E.L.D., it is not yet possible to come up with weapons that can threaten Leon. The expected situation of the president's anger did not appear, but he sighed and helplessly said, with our current level of science and technology, it seems that it is indeed difficult to develop a weapon that can directly hurt Leon. He shook his head and said, now that the whole world is facing his threat, the asteroid has more than a day to descend, and there is not much time left for us, and now I order, in my capacity as president, Director Nick, to contact the Asgard Aider, saying that the Earth has reached the point of life and death, and asking them to send someone to help us through the difficulties. Nick Fury nodded. I will. Any one of the 9 worlds is destroyed, the balance of the 9 worlds will be broken, although our Earth has not had any contact with them for a long time, they will certainly not sit idly by. I have a way to convince them. Very good. In addition, it is time for us to launch an initiative in the world. Leon's strength we in the United States a country cannot defeat. At this time only by gathering the power of the world, we have the possibility of winning. This is a real war. Our opponents are incomparably strong. We must also unite all the forces that can be united. Under the threat of Leon, the president of the world's most powerful country finally laid the head of his arrogance. And just when everyone in the meeting was still deliberating, a phone in the president's hand suddenly rang. The president answered, and after a moment the look became inexplicably strange. What do you say? Wakanda? The poorest country in Africa? Are they capable of solving this crisis? To be clear, is it to solve the asteroid? The further down the answer, the look on the president's face became more and more strange, and finally he couldn't help but directly reprimand, damn, do you know what you're talking about? It was an asteroid 2 kilometers in diameter, not a ping-pong ball. What ability did they have to solve that asteroid? Are you joking? The president hung up the phone angrily, and only Nick Fury's face changed in the audience, and then he coughed and said with a strange face, Mr. President, if it is Wakanda, their technological ability may be able to help us through this crisis. What? The president thought he had heard wrongly. In his perception, Wakanda was the poorest country in Africa, and its level of poverty was only a little stronger than that of some primitive tribes, and even in the whole country, there were many primitive tribes. Such a country, how could they have the ability to solve the asteroid? Wait. The president suddenly thought of something, and his face changed. Damn, is there something you S.H.I.E.L.D. is hiding from me? Nick Fury's expression became flat and he said directly, yes, Mr. President, some things are absolutely confidential, and even if you are presidents, some things are impossible to know. Fuck. The president angrily slapped the table and pointed directly at Nick Fury. You'd better say these things today. Damn, at this time, there are secrets that can't let me as the president know? Nick Fury just said plainly, okay sir, now what I want to tell you and the people in the place is some of the things in the dark of this world, which are secrets that have existed in human civilization for a long time, some of which are even older than the founding time of our country. He continued in a flat voice, although Wakanda has always been isolated, ostensibly a poor and backward agricultural country, it is actually the most technologically advanced country on the earth, with a unique and rare resource vibrating gold. Wait, Shinjin, I know, but when you say that Wakanda is the most technologically advanced country in the world, are you sure you're not joking? The president interrupted him. Yes sir, I know what I'm talking about, please don't interrupt me. Nick Fury was still the same black face, indifferent like an ice ballast, directly blocking the president's words, and then continued, their level of technology has exceeded our 400 or 500 years, and such a level of technology, if they want to, is indeed capable of solving the asteroid. Moreover, in addition to Wakanda, there are other ancient forces on the earth, such as the Divine Spear Bureau that you know, which is far away in the Eastern Kingdom, a powerful organization with many superheroes, and the Kunlun Mountain based in the Eastern Kingdom. There are also some other forces. It is difficult to introduce them to you here. I will give you some information later. Now you only need to know one thing. That is that this crisis may be a catastrophe for us, but if these ancient organizations or countries unite, they will certainly be able to survive. And now your task is to think about how we should unite with these organizations and countries. Episode 128. The president was not angry at Nick Fury's commanding tone, but after hearing the words, he meditated. On the one hand, he was a little annoyed, such a secret, as the president of the United States, he could not know. On the other hand, he was worried about the current situation. Finally, he hummed, "It's a hell of a thing. I'll let people hold an international conference to see if we can unite other countries. And as for the Wakanda you said, I will also send people to contact." "Okay, Mr. President, Asgar and the others over there I will contact. In the face of this crisis, the better prepared we are, the more help we can muster, the greater our chances of defeating Leon." Nick Fury rode. He was a man of power and wisdom, and unlike the silly and rude appearance of the average black man, he had an extremely sensitive heart and knew many things. Even the President of the United States, compared with him, is not as strong as he is in terms of some means of playing politics. The other generals did not intervene, nor did they know the real situation of Wakanda, and as generals they naturally did not need to worry about these things. All they had to do was suppress the unrest. That's it. The president finally made up his mind for the meeting. On the other side of the time, after doing all this, it didn't take long for Leon to see the killers who rushed back quickly, and he brought back 2 slightly broken robots. This robot is the secret weapon of the American side to stop the soldiers. Well, the appearance does have some similarities with the destroyer, but there are also many changes to it. In the laboratory, Leon used subatomic control to disassemble the 2 robots in front of him, and then discovered many secrets on his body. First of all, in terms of materials, the material on this thing is an alloy that he has never seen before, and after analyzing the specific values, he is also quite surprised, because the numerical aspects of this alloy can definitely be called terrible. The strength of this alloy is close to that of Edelman alloy, but it has the formidability of Edelman alloy that cannot be compared, and he analyzed the formula ratio of this alloy through in-depth analysis. In addition, what surprised him was that inside this robot, there were actually some traces of the existence of magical elements, and even the material itself was inscribed with the same thing as the FA array, and those lines were obviously the circulation route of magical energy, which made him very surprised. How can there be something magical in America? It stands to reason that they would certainly not possess this kind of knowledge. Leon thought about it slightly, and after thinking about it, he came up with a rough idea, thinking that it must have been obtained from Asgard, and it was even possible that the formula of this alloy, or the alloy itself, was provided by Asgard. He didn't know if there was any deal or connection between the two, but he thought there would be contact. After all, there was a common enemy of his own. Well, this robot's attack method is very similar to that of the soldiers, and it turns out that the problem is here. Leon found the reason. Because a core component inside this robot, that is, it is completely the ability operation mode of the warrior, which is to put the X gene cells into that metal, so that the individual has the ability to use multiple variants, and there is intelligent program control in this core, which is equivalent to the Svija subprogram of the soldier. It seems that they can make this kind of robot, or inspired by the soldiers. It is likely to be a direct imitation. Hey, there is a signal receiver, there is a smart program, and there is a motherboard needed to run the program. Sigh. Where do you guys get your confidence? Leon disassembled it to the end, but he laughed directly, and Gain found that the deadly place on this robot was the core component. Svija designed a set of intrusion procedures. Through the war network, all the soldiers are loaded with this program, and when fighting with this robot in the future, they will directly use the intrusion program to occupy the core components of these robots, and then the occupied robots will be numbered as soldiers. Leon ordered. Okay sir, the intrusion process is simple, and I expect it to be completed in 10 minutes. Svija rode. Leon nodded, and then said, in addition, make a big upgrade for all the soldiers, and all the weaknesses I found in the robots above, you must make up for them in the soldiers. Okay sir. Leon was commanding, Svija was executing, and he had done so many times, and the soldiers had been further perfected under his orders. He actually very much wanted these things to be done by Svija, but Svija's current wisdom is not enough to win any kind of work. After all, he is not really human, although he already has the ability to innovate only intelligent creatures. But he also has a very important thing, that is, inspiration. Without this thing, he could never get rid of the shackles of the machine. However, this time is not too far before Svija becomes a real person, and when Leon's ability is improved a little, he is ready to go to the universe to find the remaining Infinity Stones. The time soon came to the next day, and since yesterday, the media around the world have been paying attention to one thing, that is, the funny and smiling asteroid is rapidly approaching the Earth, and now even without a telescope, the light of the asteroid can already be seen. All the observatories had already calculated that there were at most more than 4 hours left before the asteroid fell to Earth, and it was close to the Earth's orbit. All the countries of the world are alarmed, and everyone has a sense of despair. In this case, the United States suddenly released the news. The world's major powers finally decided to unite to deal with this crisis. Leon, who heard the news, was really happy. He was very much looking forward to the scene where all the countries of the world united against themselves. It was definitely a pomp and circumstance, and just thinking about it made people excited. His main excitement is to single-handedly fight the whole world, and then overturn the whole world, so that the world feels hopeful and desperate, and there is nothing more fulfilling than this. Episode 129. The world's most powerful countries have basically united to deal with this crisis, and the funny asteroid is close to Earth, and the first thing these countries think of is to detonate the asteroid at this distance. Within an hour, the United States, China, Russia, France, and other countries fired more than 100 super intercontinental missiles into the universe, and these missiles were all loaded with nuclear warheads. Many people are looking forward to the success of this interception plan, because the cost of failure is too great for the whole world to bear. The truth is that it slapped everyone in the face and made people despair again. Hundreds of super missiles have indeed reached their intended orbits and positions, but they are still far away from the asteroid, and when the funny smiley asteroid passes by, most of them have not detonated, and even more, they have detonated in between. On Earth at that time, even during the day, you could see the flashes of light in the sky, which were the light of the nuclear bomb explosion, almost overpowering the sun's brilliance. But that's all. The aftermath of those nuclear bomb explosions is extremely strong, and under the cosmic vacuum environment, the power of the shockwaves combined is also earth-shattering. But such a shockwave did not even cause any damage to the surface of the funny asteroid, because the speed of the asteroid was so fast that it passed directly through the area where the shockwave was located, like a beast rushing out of a wall of smoke and dust, but the surface melted a little. Now the asteroid looks, the funny smiley face has become more funny because of the superficial melting, and with such a big smiley face rushing towards the Earth, the world will not be frightened. And this interception failure directly interrupted the spirit of 80% of the ordinary people in the world, and all of them were already desperate, thinking that the world would definitely fall into destruction, and there was no possibility of salvation. It is precisely because of this that some countries whose social order is already very loose have collapsed at once, and all kinds of thugs have appeared on the streets, some attacking passers-by, some are doing all kinds of ugly things, there have been many violent crimes, and the order of the country has also collapsed. There are not only one or two countries that have undergone such changes, but many countries, and as long as they are countries that aspire to freedom, basically such changes have occurred. It is also at this moment that those people give full play to the ugliness of human nature, which makes people sick. Liang saw all this in his eyes, just a cold smile. He was well aware of the ugliness in human nature, and he also knew that under this pressure, there would definitely be a lot of national order on the Earth to collapse, and the collapse was so thorough, it still made him feel a little sad. Then he ignored these things and focused on the asteroid, which was now the next day. More than 2 hours had passed since the missile launch, that is, at most an hour or so before the asteroid fell. He was eager to see what other hands the Earth had to do to stop the disaster, and in order to see the asteroid hit the Earth up close, he even came to the sky above the planet's drop point early, accompanied by Chin and Lorna. Leon, are you really going to do this? Compared with Chin's indifference, Lorna is naturally full of humanity. The Earth is the place where she lives. She is naturally emotional, although she is already with Liang, and does not oppose what he has done, but at this moment, in the face of the imminent destruction of the Earth, she still can't help but ask. Liang shrugged at her and smiled calmly. This must be done. Why? Lorna asked a question that had been hidden in her heart for a long time. She knew how powerful Liang was, and she only knew why Liang did this, or what kind of fierce means, or it was inevitable that she would think more. The reason is that I told you a long time ago. I want to see if the world will change. The world is full of war and killing. The pain caused by human beings is far more than I have brought to them. Even if they always put themselves in the position of a master, then I don't mind letting them change their identity, such as victims. Although Leon was smiling, his eyes were very plain, and he did not show other emotions. Lorna sighed and said, "Are you so sure that people will be able to survive this crisis? What if they don't have the ability? If the asteroid falls down, won't the world really be destroyed?" Liang patted her shoulder and said, "Don't imagine that humans are so weak. Their potential is much stronger than you think. Even if the asteroid really smashes, it will not necessarily destroy mankind. They have enough ability to cope with the things that follow. Mutants have been in the world for so long, and they have not seen the world really destroyed, but mutants still have to survive in the society composed of ordinary people, and have never occupied an active position, which is already very telling. Human society is not so fragile, and when they really react, the energy they explode will exceed your imagination." Liang said this, but it made Lorna even more surprised. How could she not have imagined that Liang, such an anti-human and anti-social person, had such a profound understanding of human beings themselves? "I hope so," Lorna said helplessly. Liang smiled slightly, took her hand, the latter looked up slightly, just silently leaned towards him. Liang knew her uneasiness. After all, what he was doing now was indeed too amazing. She could make up her mind to accompany him. It was already a great determination. On the other side, the piano is still calm, without any emotion, just waiting. At this time, there were a number of helicopters in the distance, countless warplanes in the sky passing quickly, and in a higher place, there were huge aircraft as the Air Command, which was the second interception site for humans, and it was obvious that they had begun to prepare now. The helicopters and fighters had apparently spotted them, but no one had attacked him, because at this time, Leon had been lucky not to attack them. Episode 130. This scene is very spectacular. The dense planes in the distant sky are flying everywhere, one by one in formation scattered around. Counting down, the total number of helicopters and fighters present is more than 4,000. Such a force is completely a scene that can only appear in Super War. But these fighters appeared this time only to deal with an asteroid, and this asteroid is the root of the destruction of the world. But now, in the presence of Leon, the culprit who caused the disaster, they still choose to ignore him, because Leon's existence itself is a huge threat, a key factor in the failure of their operation. No one dared to do it at this time, because provoking him would only make things worse, and the consequences would be unbearable for the whole world, and at that point, the ordinary people of the world would absolutely die 90%. I have to say that there is a very ironic point that Leon, the murderer who wants to destroy the world, and the countries of the United States, actually have a strange tacit understanding at this time, which is not shown by both sides, but is actually observed. Leon would not have acted at this time, and those of them chose to ignore him when he was transparent. Time slowly passed. In the blink of an eye it was half of the past. More and more fighters and combat units were deployed in the sky, and they also showed more and more organization. Among these fighters, Leon even found the figure of many other countries' fighters. Obviously this interception is a joint operation situation, not a country in the United States fighting alone. His eyesight was extremely strong, and he could clearly see the weapons hanging by those fighters, and then he did not pick them slightly, because he found that among these fighters, there were at least more than 20 nuclear warheads, which seemed to be not small. Liang's mind power radiated out, through the atmosphere, through the low Earth orbit, and soon saw the asteroid that was coming at a rapid speed, and according to the speed, it was still more than 10 minutes away from landing at most. These 10 minutes are the final preparation time of mankind, and the life and death of human society on Earth will only produce results within these 10 minutes. Leon was expectant, Lorna was worried, and those in the units that had been deployed were horrified and suspicious, but at this time, even if they were suspicious, they could only start intercepting according to the battle plan. Soon, Leon saw the planes where the high-altitude command was located flying away in the distance, and the fighters began the angle of high elevation, rushing straight towards the sky dome, and the acceleration of less than a minute increased the speed of the fighters to the maximum, and then the missiles under their wings were all dumped one by one. Thousands of missiles, all of which were left, were launched and flew towards a certain position in the air, naturally extremely fast, and Leon knew the intentions of these people in an instant. They were obviously going to use these missiles to intercept the first time in the atmosphere, and wanted to use the power of their explosions to reduce the speed of the asteroid slightly. This plan is feasible. At this moment, above the sky dome, a faint hint of redness could already be seen, which was caused by the friction caused by the asteroid's contact with the outermost part of the atmosphere, and those missiles were also running to that point. 2 minutes later, one point of light after another lit up above the sky dome, which was a missile explosion, all of which converged on one point, and the calculation was very accurate. However, the movement produced by these explosions was easily dispersed by the small, downward thrust of the small, downward thrust and impact braking. The two streams of Liang interacted. Liang clearly perceived in the mind force, the asteroid's falling speed has a slight deviation, the speed is reduced by at least 1/100th. This degree of decline is naturally a drop in the bucket for the asteroid, but then 5 nuclear bombs exploded in this instant, and 5 rays of light comparable to the sun lit up in the atmosphere, making it difficult to look at it directly. The fluctuation of this explosion can be much stronger than the explosion power of the previous missile combination, and through calculations, at the exact detonation time, it is just on the path of the asteroid, and even the asteroid has a direct collision. The 5 nuclear bombs exploded together, and the high temperature and radiation generated in an instant directly shattered the asteroid's yellowish outer layer, and even caused cracks and melts on its surface, and the diameter was also reduced by 1/6 in this explosion. Liang raised an eyebrow, quite surprised. He once again saw the power of human beings, which is a complete scientific and technological power, a power that belongs to human beings themselves, although it still did not intercept the asteroid, but it was enough for Liang to take a look. However, the power of the explosion is indeed good, so that the asteroid's landing orbit has a considerable deviation, and its speed has plummeted by nearly half. The mass decreases, the speed plummets, so that the power generated by its impact on the ground will naturally show a geometric reduction, and Leon estimates that even if it hits the ground now, its power will only make nearly half of the volcano on the Earth erupt at most, which is no longer enough to threaten the survival of the entire human race. It's amazing. He had to sigh, and then said to Lorna next to him, "You see, this is the power of people. Your worries are completely in vain. They are not as weak as you think, and even many times, they are far more powerful than you think, which is why mutants are so powerful, but they have never been able to occupy the mainstream in society." Lorna looked at all this, and the shock in her heart was naturally needless to say, and she sighed, and she didn't know whether she was worried about the humans themselves or the mutants. The oppression and change that Leon has brought to this world is not an opportunity for mutants. This first interception path here, basically, even if it is over, very successful, at least Leon already feels that these people have done enough success, and at this time the asteroid is still extremely fast, and any mutant other than him wants to intercept alone. It is extremely unrealistic, even Magneto. And then another rain of missiles flew out and headed somewhere the asteroid landed, in the same way as the first interception line, hoping to slow down the asteroid with an explosion,